in my tradition, the teaching is, it doesn't matter what you do, it matters how you do it. The inspiration, the motivation, the ethics, that matters more than the actual physical thing that you do. That's what I'm most proud of about this team. The commitment and the desire to live by these values that we are sharing with the world. That's who we are. So with that, it's a nice segue into introducing our newest colleague, Reverend Dr. Audrey Price, who is joining as an associate director for us. It's been 1 month? 1 month, so very new. And so she will facilitate our conversation for us. Thank you.
Well, hello, friends.
Hello.
So it is my pleasure to facilitate and introduce a panel to you. So you would have to journey with the Religion and Society program past this moment to learn more about my story. I bring to, as we return to our roots of having panel discussions, Doug Kindschi, who is the director of the Kaufman Interfaith Institute and University Professor of Mathematics and Philosophy and Dean at Grand Valley State University. He is also a primary contributor to our new report about interfaith work and religious pluralism in West Michigan, which you can pick up today. So we have that report available for each of you. We also have Eboo Patel, and he is the president and founder of Interfaith America, a leading interfaith organization in the United States. Under his leadership, Interfaith America has worked with governments, universities, private companies, and civic organizations to make faith a bridge of cooperation rather than a barrier of division. His most recent book is We Need to Build Notes for a Diverse Democracy. And we have the very Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas. Dr. Douglas serves as the Dean of the Episcopal Divinity School at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, and the Bill and Judy Moyers Chair in Theology at Union. She is also canon theologian in residence at Trinity Church, Wall Street. She is the author of numerous books, most recently, Resurrection Hope, A Future Where Black Lives Matter. I welcome our esteemed colleagues here. So, as we just heard, we have 3 committed persons who have distinguished careers in building institutions, who purpose to raise up, to form, to connect human beings to each other within and across religious traditions. So I ask you, as you focus on 3 questions and what will be a robust 20-25 minutes, and give us a little bit more about who you are, as I ask you, in what ways have you done this work? And in what ways do you suggest that we do this work in the next decade that you didn't even imagine would be possible, but you're seeing a twinkling of hope? Oh yeah, I failed you. I'm supposed to call
Nobody wants
people.
to start? I will. I'm kind of the unusual member of the panel, partly by age. I could be Eboo's father. We just my wife and I celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary. You haven't hit that yet, no. So
almost at 20.
Okay. So anyway, and I come out of the science world. My field is mathematics and philosophy and physics. And I was dean of science for 28 years at my institution. And my first experience with conflict was the science religion issues. It was called warfare back there in the 60s and 70s, the warfare between science and religion. Now, nobody thought that Baptists were going to bring weapons against Buddhists or that Methodists and Muslims were going to have physical contact. But there was an attitude of conflict. So I grew up with that. And when late in my career, when the university had the opportunity to create the Interfaith Institute, the president said to me, "You know about this religion stuff because you do science and religion. Would you be the founding director?" And I took that on. And so I'm very pleased to be part of this. I sometimes say I had a 28-year, very exciting career at my university because we grew from 5,000 to 25,000 during that period. But now I have a calling. And I really feel strongly about the calling of bringing people together with difference, especially those with religious difference.
I was trying to process that question, and as you talked about, particularly sort of the unexpected and the surprises, and I think I, of course, my primary job right now is as dean of Episcopal Divinity School at Union, but have taught over the last over 40 years in various institutions, and one of the things that I've learned over time is that if we began in conversation, no matter how different in the different contexts that we come from and who we are, and the diversity of who we are, not only religiously, but ethnically, racially, etc., that if we began our conversation by with the intention of affirming the sacredness of everyone's humanity, if that's the starting point, then it is surprising what then can emerge. What's so often the case in conversations where we expect conflict is that we don't intentionally affirm one another's humanity. And I have learned over time that when we can make that intentional, said, on my syllabi, I put that the underlying assumption here is everyone is sacred and everyone has value, and what they bring to the table has value. If we start there, and I won't go further, if we start there, for me, then surprising things can happen.
So I'm going to fly my plane right in the middle here, because Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown Douglas just gave us kind of the cosmic vision of what interfaith cooperation is and ought to be about, the sacredness of every human being. And my friend Dr. Kindschi gave us a local vision of what it looks like in West Michigan. Right. And by the way, I think part of the genius, a huge part of the genius of Merrill when she began this and this program is that it didn't just play in the Boss-Blosh corridor. Right. It wasn't, let's go find another person from a think tank to offer a view at a panel. It was also, hey, there's a math professor in West Michigan in a community that was historically Dutch Reform, in which a Jewish family founded an Interfaith Institute at a public university. And we're going to go figure out how interfaith cooperation looks there, right? It is a very local story. I think that there's a middle layer, which is a national story, and then there's probably a layer right above that which is a global story. But I'll just stick with the national story for a moment here. I think one of our opportunities, again, entirely consistent with you, where you all are flying, also is to tell the American possibility of interfaith cooperation, right? And if you think about the European founders of the 76 generation, and also the centuries before them. People like Roger Williams and John Bond, but also people like Estebanico and the people who are saying the Muslim adhan in the cotton fields of the South. There's a long story of interfaith cooperation in the United States. We're the first nation to believe you could have a religiously diverse democracy. Right? That is new on the planet at a mass level in the late 18th century. And for all the sins and mistakes of our founding fathers, and they should not be forgotten, they came pretty close to getting one dimension of identity right, and that's religious identity. You would take what Jefferson, Madison, Franklin, Washington, that whole crew, you would take what they said about religious diversity in the 1780s and 1790s now, right? It sounds good today in 2022. That this government will give to bigotry no sanction and to persecution no assistance. That's George Washington, right? James Madison signs a treaty with a Muslim nation. Benjamin Franklin builds a hall in Philadelphia and says the platform of this hall will be open to preachers of any persuasion. If the Grand Mufti of Constantinople wants to send an imam preaching in this pulpit is available to him. That's the late 18th century. That's the North Star. And we have an opportunity to live up to it. So the opportunity to say this is an American story that we can realize in our time, right? And I think there's something special about our time, which is that there are massive demographic shifts that have taken place over the last few decades that we have an opportunity to live into and kind of realize as far as the American possibility goes. And so, get the term Judeo-Christian really as a response to the violent white Christian nationalism of the 1920s. It is a group of interfaith leaders called the NCCJ, the National Conference on Christians and Jews, who are responding to the KKK's anti-Blackness, anti-Semitism, and anti-Catholicism of the 1920s, who basically invent a term, and that term is Judeo-Christian. And I know it sounds inadequate today, but think about how much better it is to be Jewish in 1990 than in 1930. Demographics have changed in the last 80 years. Attitudes have changed. There are now as many Muslims in America as ELCA Lutherans. The median age of Muslims is 20 years younger. We are no longer a Judeo-Christian nation. We're now Interfaith America. We like that so much we renamed our organization after it, right? What does it look like to help lead America into that new chapter on the great American story of religion?
Yes. To that, and what you're talking about, it seems to me, Eboo, is changing a gaze and our gaze on history, right? And somehow we're talking about changing the narrative of our story. There is a vision in our founding fathers, because they were the founding fathers, sometimes I say by accident, but somehow they miraculously put forth this vision of an interfaith America, this vision of an America where everyone was to be respected and there would be freedom and justice for all. There was that vision. We also know that there was a competing narrative. And that competing narrative was in the foundation of this nation as well. And it was a competing narrative of those Puritans and Pilgrims who came over who really believed themselves to be the descendants of Anglo-Saxons, and they were going to create this city on a hill, and that was going to carry forth this Anglo-Saxon heritage. We are at a point where we have to decide what kind of America we want to be. If we want to, I always say we're this, borrowing from W.E.B. Du Bois, right? That we're this country with a warring soul. And we've got to make a decision. If we're going to be that Anglo-Saxonist, Puritan, Christian, that narrative, America, or if we're going to live into the vision of this country where there's freedom and justice for all and this sort of interfaith, multicultural and all of that America. How do we, one, lead the way? Because I think it is religious leaders and others have to lead the way in helping us to decide who we want to be and what kind of and what kind of people we want to be. But that begins by changing days on history and telling the truth of our history, yes, and also this side of the history in which you were speaking about, and that gets lost in the narrative. So that we begin to believe that we don't have that vision for that kind of America.
I want to come back to your question because, I mean, this is wonderful, and I love to hear both of you talk, and I've followed you both in the past years, both online and in person. But let's come back to the question: what is going to happen in the next generation? I'm of the age where I'm thinking about that a lot. And I just want to tell a little story about when I first was asked to be this. I had already finished my dean career, but the first thing I did was hire someone right out of college, Katie Gordon, you know her, and she was a religious studies major, and she was doing basically secretarial work. I said, you have an opportunity to do something more than that. Why don't you get involved in the campus? We are actually a community-based organization, but you get involved in our campus. And I learned so much from her. And what I learned, and I'm going to make this personal here, not for me, but for someone else. What I learned is that she had insight to what was going on in the student population that I didn't have. I was too far removed from it, both in terms of position and in terms of age. She was the one that taught me how to not do a program and then try to get students to come to it. She says, if you want to have students involved, get them involved in the basic planning of the program. They introduced Katie, and the students introduced me to Simran. And out of that Simran came, and we learned so much from him. Now, what I learned is that I need to listen to the Katies of the world. I need to listen to that next generation and be prepared to not do what I think is the best thing to do, but let them lead me in new ways.
Oh, that takes us to our second question. Bridge builders. I think that's a name that you embody. We have noticed that religious values and communities, and I would offer human dignity, have been caught up in the American cycles of polarization and politics, such as the work of building bridges itself can seem treacherous in our political, theological, ideological, and all other types of camps that humans tend to set up. Bridge builders, how do you bring others into the fold, and how do you journey forward with them?
So, a couple years ago, I was in Oregon in summertime, and there were fires everywhere, like on 3 sides of us. And I happened to be reading this piece in the New York Times, which opened with the line that when there is a fire on the Catholic side of the city of Mostar in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the Muslim fire department does not respond. Just pause there for you to consider that, okay? And when there is a fire on the Muslim side of Mostar, the Catholic fire department does not respond. And then the article goes on to describe a city which incidentally is not in hot conflict. This is not a city at war. That is totally segregated institutionally along ethno-religious lines. So Catholics and Muslims go to the same schools. Catholics go from 7:30 a.m. to 1:30. Muslims go from 2 to 8:30. Different nightclubs, different soccer leagues. The only integrated institution in the whole city is the garbage dump, but they have different garbage companies. So I'm in Oregon, and there's fires on three sides of me, and I have this kind of crazy idea. Who's fighting the fires? Do they know it's me they're fighting them for? And all these other people too, all these Jews and Zoroastrians and Sikhs and Catholics and atheists, whoever is fighting these fires, do they know who they're fighting them for? And you get this sense of a nation actually that at a very basic level kind of cooperates. Kind of cooperates. Honestly, that's really inspiring. Right? People say to me, like, where does interfaith cooperation take place? I'm like, every hospital in the entire country, every minute of the day, on every floor, all the time. And by the way, faith really matters in those instances, right? There are Muslims and Hindus and Jews walking in and they are saying their prayers. The hospital was founded by a Catholic order. It's run by an atheist who grew up Buddhist, right? Like that's every hospital in America. And part of what I think is very special about this country is that groups start institutions that are inspired by their faith identity that serve people of all identities. Right? So HIAS, I'll use one example and pass it on. HIAS is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Who knows this organization? It's founded in the early 1880s at a high point of Russian pogroms against Jews. And for the next, 80 years or so, HIAS had a lot of work to do with Jews. It's why it was founded, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Right? And people are watching U.S. and the Holocaust right now by Burns. So, it's devastating to watch that. And HIAS has a lot of work to do. Okay, so by the 1970s, most of the Jews who want to be resettled somewhere, who want to be resettled in the United States, they're resettled. Did HIAS close down? Did HIAS close those down? No. You know what they do now? They resettle Muslims. I think this is remarkable. An organization founded by Jews to resettle Jews who are going through unbelievably difficult times around the world believes its Jewish values mean that they resettle people from everywhere. And by the way, that's like half of American civil society. Right? Catholic universities were founded principally to do faith formation for Catholics. Now they educate everybody. Jewish Hospital in Louisville was founded principally to serve Jews when Jews couldn't go to other hospitals. Now they heal everybody, right? That's a huge part of bridge building in a diverse democracy. I think we should appreciate that. Right? We should cherish it. We should ask the question, how do we strengthen and spread it?
Thank you. And I guess I like when we say fly in the middle. So I'll start from sort of a more personal example of when I found myself in a situation where bridge building was necessary. And people, they were in the room, yet they were divided one against another. And it was sort of a very politicized discussion, if you will. And I remember in that time, and some of you may have heard me do this before, but it came to me then. And I said, I don't know every major religion, but every major religion that I'm aware of has some form of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I say to myself, there's something, I call it a reverse golden rule, that's even more challenging. Don't withhold from another what you would not want withheld from yourself. And I remember in this space asking the people in the room, I said, how many of you want a decent home to live in? Everybody across the divides raised their hand. No one kept their hand down. And I went on, how many of you want enough to eat? Everybody raised their hand. How many of you want health care for your loved ones, for yourself? Nobody in the room didn't raise their hand. And this heretofore had been a very contentious discussion. And went forward. How many of you want to be able to leave your home and feel safe? And that you aren't going to be attacked or assaulted because of what you look like or don't look like, because of who you are or who you are not. Everybody in the place raised their hand. And I said, don't withhold from another that which you would not want withheld from yourself. And then go about trying to create a society and a world that doesn't withhold from another that which you would not want withheld from yourself. And as we think about the laws, the policies, doctrines that we support or don't support, we ask ourselves the question, are we withholding from another that which we would not want withheld from ourselves? That's my beginning of bridge building.
I pick up a little different angle on this because it's an angle of hope. Because when I talked about science and religion, there's a lot of progress there, but when interfaith began, there was a sense that there was serious problems when religions combined with governments, combined with armies. I said that if we're not careful, we may not have a 22nd century. You know, we've got to solve this problem, and that's committed me to go into this work. But, you know, we have made remarkable progress. In our community, you know, which is a very conservative, primarily Republican area, there is so much appreciation and understanding and cooperation between the various faith communities. We have really made some progress in this area. What's interesting is that a few decades ago, when the surveys were made, it was found that parents said that they really wouldn't want their children to marry someone of another faith. Now, if they wanted to marry someone of another political party, that's no big deal. In a couple of decades, that has totally shifted now. Now people in the surveys say that if our kids want to marry somebody of another faith, that's okay. But they don't want them to marry someone of another party. You know, the polarization is not in the faith communities as it was at one point. We have made real progress, and I think we can lead in building for the other polarization that's happening in our community.
Thank you. Whew. Well, as you know, we have a third question, but as we suspected, we don't have enough time. But what I will say, and what you have done, is you've both embodied the mission of what we are seeking to do as we partner with all of you to dialogue, to unite, to respect differences, to affirm differences, but to all be on the common ground that every human being has human dignity, and that therefore we work and endeavor to create a free, just, and equitable society. So thank you, and thank you all.